Mr. Speaker, New Democrats welcome and support today's apology and exoneration. We join the government in acknowledging the harm done to the Tsilhqot'in people prior, during, and since the Tsilhqot'in War of 1864 and 1865. In particular, we want to express our support for the exoneration of the 6 Tsilhqot'in chiefs who were deceived with the false promise of a truce, only to be wrongfully arrested, tried, and hanged as criminals. Chief Joel Font said, speaking of today's exoneration, if you come into Tsilhqot'in territory, you had to have Tsilhqot'in permission. And when the Waddington Road building crew came in, they didn't get that permission. And when they took our women, abused our women, we declared war on them. The Tsilhqot'in people took justified action to defend their territory, and they were met not only with violent escalation, but with dishonor. This was a critical event in the Tsilhqot'in War and a blight in the history of British Columbia. But more than that, the violation of the Tsilhqot'in people and land is part of Canada's legacy of anti-Indigenous colonial violence that still continues today.
Well before the arrival of the Europeans, the Tsilhqot'in nation lived deep in the heart of the mountains and on the rivers of the Canadian West, in the heart of what is today British Columbia. Well before colonization, these communities shared a common history and a common culture in taking care of their lands. And like elsewhere in Canada, colonization trampled on the lands of the Tsilhqot'in nation. This was stolen land, no negotiations, no diplomacy. Like elsewhere in Canada, smallpox raged. It struck Aboriginal peoples who weren't immunized against the diseases brought here by the Europeans. And historical accounts lead us to believe that this was intentional. And like elsewhere in Canada, women were abused. The Tsilhqot'in had to act to defend their people, to defend their land. 154 years ago, the Tsilhqot'in War was declared. In the spring of 1864, a road-building crew was attacked. The settlers had come illegally into Tsilhqot'in territory with the approval of the colonial government at the time, and they were driven out. Over the summer, chiefs were invited to negotiate peace, but they were betrayed. It was only shackles and prison bars that awaited them. Their fate was sealed. They were hanged for murder. 6 Tsilhqot'in Nation chiefs were hanged.
Ago, the government of British Columbia fully exonerated the Tsilhqot'in chiefs for actions taken in defense of their laws and territories in 1864. On behalf of New Democrats, I echo the BC government's words when I say that these chiefs were not criminals. These chiefs were not outlaws. These chiefs were proud leaders engaged in the defense of their lands and of their peoples. On this day of apology and exoneration, we also want to honor the many Tsilhqot'in historians, activists, advocates, and knowledge keepers who have continued in the face of overwhelming odds to honor the past and fight for a more just future. This day is a small vindication of your struggles. May it be the first of many more to come. It must be said that this apology and this exoneration are long overdue. But as was noted in the letter of understanding between the Tsilhqot'in Nation and Canada, we recognize that reconciliation begins with truth-telling and healing. So let us continue telling the truth here today. We believe, Mr. Speaker, in justice for Indigenous peoples. We believe in reconciliation. We believe it is time to act, because Indigenous communities cannot wait another 150 years for hope. Because even these lands on which we stand today, these lands on which I rise in this hallowed chamber, these are the unceded lands of the Algonquin people. Mr. Speaker, unless we continue to tell these hard truths and truly addresses the violence of Canada's ongoing colonial history, we will never be able to heal the trauma left in its wake. And reconciliation will be nothing more than a cruel deception like the one that stole the life of 6 Tsilhqot'in chiefs 150 years ago.
Mr. Speaker, It is time to put reconciliation into practice. The First Nations of this country suffered 150 years of colonialism. The 150 next years should be made up of reconciliation, respect for the earth, respect for cultures, from nation to nation. The Tsilhqot'in Nation and the Aboriginal peoples of this country have human rights, and it is time they were respected. We cannot continue to ignore the voices of all those who walked this land before us.
And fishing rights on the New Channel territory on the west coast of British Columbia is wrong. Fighting survivors of residential schools like the one from St. Anne's is wrong. Leaving 81 First Nation communities on long-term boiled water advisories is wrong. Failing to appropriately address the housing crisis gripping First Nations communities from coast to coast to coast is wrong. Failing to reform a justice system that disproportionately incarcerates Indigenous people and exonerates their killers is wrong. A society that turns a blind eye to Indigenous women being murdered and going missing at an alarming and disproportionate rate is wrong. Real change can't be all talk. La Déclaration des droits des peuples.
Mr. Speaker, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples must become law here. And once again, I want to pay tribute to the work of my colleague from Abitibi James Nunavut AU, who has been leading the way to have Aboriginal languages recognized here in this House. This is a key part of reconciliation. Mr. Speaker, as these words are being read today, many colleagues in this House are probably learning about the existence of the Tsilhqot'in Nation and the 1864-65 events. That's the case with me. It was only in preparing this speech that I learned about the Tsilhqot'in War and the hanging of 6 Tsilhqot'in chiefs. And my ignorance is not unique in Canada. We know too little about all those who preceded us. We know too little about those who protected this land that today we are sharing. We have a duty to remember. We have a duty to be curious. We have a duty to learn. We have a duty to hand down the history of the First Nations, Métis and Inuit. But in order to do that, we need to take the time. We need to mark a moment on our calendar. We have to spend time to better know and understand each other. And that is why we support the bill of the member for Dinite Missinippi Churchill River to make a statutory holiday in Canada, National Aboriginal Peoples Day.
Reconciliation Commission, a National Indigenous Peoples Day would be an opportunity to honor the many contributions Indigenous peoples have made to this land and reflect on the many challenges they still face today. A statutory holiday would offer a public opportunity to better understand and ensure Canadians recognize our common history and the legacy of the treaty relationship, which remains a vital component of the reconciliation process. This day would allow us to take stock of our dark history, like the hanging of 6 chiefs from the Tsilhqot'in Nation. Mr. Speaker, today's apology of the Government of Canada and the exoneration of the Tsilhqot'in chiefs are welcomed. It's a step in the right direction, and it will hopefully provide some closure, comfort, and peace to the Tsilhqot'in Nation. But the legacy of today's apology will be in the concrete actions this government and the ones after it take to build the true nation-to-nation relationship with First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. We cannot continue along the same path we have so unjustly walked for centuries. To the members of the Tsilhqot'in Nation and other Indigenous representatives in the House today, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your strength in the face of colonialism. I want to thank you for your determination to see justice done. I want to thank you for your courage in the face of horrendous acts of violence, ignorance, and denial. Thank you for your patience with our young country as we strive to be better. During my preparation for his speech, Chief Roger William explained that the Tsilhqot'in don't apologize the same way the English or French do. To apologize, the person must admit that they did wrong. We know we have much to do so that we can all stand on equal footing. But today, I look up to all of you and say that Tsilhqot'in, Shla Guzu Hacha. We did wrong, and we will do better. Thank you.